Hey everyone, welcome to the investor.bet AFL betting preview for the prelim finals. We've got two games we're going to cover in this video. Firstly, between the Sydney Swans and Port Adelaide Power, and then the Geelong Cats against the Brisbane Lions. We're going to go through each matchup, who I think is going to win and why, what I think is going to happen in that game, and most importantly, what I'm considering betting on in that matchup. And we're going to do that using the tools in the bet finders. So not just making a judgment or an overreaction from what happened last week or just whatever we remember. We're using statistics and actual data and trends about team performances to predict how they're going to perform in this game. So we're going to be using the bet finder tools that you see here, comparing the team matchups, then also going through the different betting trends, how these teams have performed against each other historically, what the odds were in those games, who covered, what the total points line was, and did those games go over or under, and what's been happening, so that when you're betting on the games, you're able to make the best possible betting decision. Because if you do that every single time, you put that research into your selections every single time, then you can be profitable every single month and every single year. And it kind of removes that roller coaster of ups and downs. Like you have a really good day, then you give it back, then you have a good week, then give it back the following week, and you just can't get that consistent growth that we're looking for. So before we get into the two upcoming games, I just want to quickly recap what happened during the semifinals. So they're both super close games. Port Adelaide beat Hawthorn on Friday night by 3 points. And then on Saturday night, GWS lost to the Brisbane Lions after having a big lead in this game. They pretty much got out to an over 40-point lead midway through the third quarter. You can see there when Lockie Ash kicked that goal. And then Brisbane kicked 11 off the final 14 goals to get over the top and win that game late. And you can see here during the fourth quarter, GWS got an early goal there through Toby Green, and then Brisbane went on a run to wrestle back the lead to win by 5 points. The Giants-Lions game went over the total points line, and then the Port Adelaide-Hawthorn game went under the total points line, but both very close matches. Brisbane Lions winning as an underdog. We're able to hit them. Unfortunately, we backed Hawthorn as the other selection, and they weren't able to get over the line as a favorite. So we split on the main plays. So now looking ahead to the games coming up, we've got Sydney, who are coming off that week rest after beating GWS, who have since been eliminated. And then Port Adelaide, who were hammered by Geelong by 84 points in their opening final, then came back to them by 3 last week. And then Geelong, who obviously beat Port Adelaide, which you'll get a little bit of indication on that Geelong form when Port Adelaide play on Friday night. And then the Brisbane Lions, who won comfortably over Carlton in their opening elimination final, and then got over the top of GWS by 5 points last week. Brisbane Lions are the only side who didn't finish in the top 4 to still be in. So whether they can get through against the Cats this week is what we're going to cover in this the next few minutes. So we're going to start with the Swans Port Adelaide game, because that's being played first. On Monday, so I'm recording this Tuesday afternoon, and the Swans were 20.5-point favorites. That number's come down to minus 19.5 now. And the total for this game is 168.5 points, which is the exact same total as it was when these sides met in round 21. So not really that long ago, only, just over a month ago did they last meet. Port were 2.5-point favorites for that game, and won by a big margin, by 112 points in the end. So, they're going to have that bit of confidence of a big win, just recently against Sydney. They've also won the past 8 against the Swans and covered the past 3. So, for any team for them to play in a prelim final, and you obviously have to factor in it's going to need to be a top side in the competition. Swans would just about be their first pick based on their history against them. They've also won their last 3 games at the SCG. They do have a 6-12 overall record there. So, historically, like of all their games, they're only winning 33% of them, but have won their last 3. The concern with that, though, is they've only played there once since 2018. That game was played in 2023, so last season. They haven't played there. It's only 1 game in the past 6 years. Whereas, Swans have only lost 2 games there this season against the Western Bulldogs and by 1 point against Fremantle. Off the top of my head, home field advantage clearly with Sydney. Looking through the other trends, 4 of the past 5 between these two sides have gone under the total points line. And with that total set at the same number it was, kind of Port nearly kicked over the total themselves last time. However, lineups have definitely changed then. A few of the key players that contributed to that are currently out of the side for Port Adelaide. If we bring up the team stats from that game, I just need to jump back here. I was too quick with the clicking. So if we bring up the match center for that recent matchup, and this was a game like Port Adelaide got on top early and really ran away with it. You can see 45-0 at quarter time, 86-9 at halftime, 111-22 at 3/4 time, and then running out winners. You'll also notice Port Adelaide won all 4 quarters. So Sydney weren't able to generate, even a quarter where they were able to be on top. Looking through the goal kickers, Willie Rowley and Georgiades both kicked 4. Charlie Dixon kicked 3, who's currently not in the side. So did Dan Houston. Francis Evans and Ollie Wines kicked a goal. And then from a disposals perspective, majority of the top disposal getters are still in for Port Adelaide. Zach Butters carrying an injury. Kane Farrell and Dan Houston both out though. So, they do have those key outs, which is the concern for them against Sydney. And with Sydney coming into this off, that week's rest, which, over recent times hasn't seemed to, have a big of an impact as it has in previous years since they've implemented the week before the finals bye. But I think it's going to help Sydney in this situation. They haven't compared to how they're performing earlier in the season, they had that run of about 6 weeks where they really struggled with just the win against North Melbourne. Coming into finals, they did win their final 3 and then beat GWS. The only concern I have, the 3 teams they beat leading into finals were Adelaide, Essendon, and Collingwood. All 3 of those are non-top 8 sides. So pretty much since you got to go all the way back to round 15 for the other game where they beat a top 8 side. So the last 2 wins against top 8 sides have been against GWS. And then prior to that, you got to go back to round 13 for the last time they beat another side who finished in the top 8. With that being said, and with Port's record against them, I still think Sydney win this game. I think just they're clearly the better side and have a lot more points in them than Port Adelaide do. The key with Sydney winning this game is going to be one in the midfield. Port Adelaide have a very, very strong midfield. I'd say they probably have the best midfield at full strength in the competition. However, they kind of have, average forward line and average defense. So Port Adelaide's success really hinges on winning the midfield battle, which is what they did against Sydney, back in round 21. Whether they can do that again on the road, off that last week's game is, what we're going to find out in this matchup. But I think the Swans' key focus is going to be on winning the battle in the midfield. If they can do that, Sydney will win this game and win it comfortably. The Port defense won't be able to stop them enough to keep themselves in the game. But, if Port's midfield get on top, that gives them the chance of winning. But I'm pretty confident Sydney win this game at home. I don't think after the season they had, they're going to let this game slip against the side who were hammered in the qualifying final and then just scraped through against Hawthorn. And there were a couple of posters in the final 2 minutes away from being eliminated last week. Sydney should get the job done. Monitoring the odds, the fact that it's already come down a little bit, just going to monitor to see if we can get a slightly better price here about the Swans on that line. But I think they can cover it and win this game, by those 20 plus points. If we look overall in the season, the games Port Adelaide have lost, and by margins, you can see from them. So they've lost 8 games this season. 3 of those 8 were by 40 plus points. And if we bring up the 1-19 margins, also you can see they've only, of the games that they have lost, which was 8 of them, only 2 of them have been from 1-19. So majority of their losses this year, all by 20 plus points. And then for the Sydney Swans, their wins, they've had 3 wins by 1 to 19, but the majority of their wins all by 20 plus. You can see 15 of their 18 wins by that margin. So I like the Sydney Swans to win this game by 20 plus points. And then the following game, Geelong versus the Brisbane Lions. This game being played at the MCG, which definitely favors Geelong. Brisbane have a really, really bad record there, only winning 2 of their past 18 games. So going back a long, long time, since they've had, any sort of winning form at this venue. They also have a really, really poor record against Geelong. Geelong have won 24 of the past 29 versus Brisbane. That goes all the way back to 2006. However, Brisbane have won 2 of the past 5. So, their recent form, winning 2 of the past 5 games gives them a little bit of confidence that they are a chance here. However, both of those wins in 2023 and 2021 came at the Gabba when they were favourites. You have to go back to a prelim final in 2004 to find the last time Brisbane beat Geelong in Melbourne. So history kind of says that Geelong will be winning this game. They come into off the week's rest. They've covered 13 of the past 16 versus Brisbane, and they're $1.73 and -4.5 for this game. So small favorites, probably a little bit less than I was expecting. I feel like the Swans could have been slightly bigger favorites, so could have Geelong. But I do, on neutral territory, this is a real 50-50 game, but being played at the MCG, massively favors Geelong. Both these sides are really, really good attacking sides. You'll notice Geelong ranked 3rd in points for 94.1, and Brisbane ranked 5th, averaging 92.6 points a game. Defensively, Brisbane are the better side. They only concede 76 points on average, whereas Geelong concede 83.8, which is ranked 11th in the league. So there really isn't a great deal between these two sides. So from a betting perspective, I'd really be looking at the try bets that either side to win by 1 to 24. I don't think Geelong were to lose this game, it's going to be by more than 4 goals. And if Brisbane, I think they're good enough defensively to keep themselves in this game. Like we've seen in recent times, Geelong's attack has been pretty much near unstoppable. They put up 138 against Port Adelaide, 168 against the West Coast Eagles. They lost their game against St Kilda, but scored 89 points still. Then we have a 90 against Adelaide, 106 against North Melbourne, and so on. But I do give Brisbane a small chance. That's why I'm suggesting either side 1 to 24, as opposed to like a Geelong 1 to 39. I'd prefer the try bet. The other main bet, and probably the one I like a little bit more for this game, even than that, is taking the total points line and taking over 173.5. I was waiting to see what numbers went up for this game because they like to release the totals for the AFL that a little bit later. And just before recording this, probably about half an hour ago, I saw it's gone up 173.5. It's 2 points lower than the line I was expecting. I was expecting 175.5. And even though 7 of the past 9 between these two sides have gone under, I think the way these sides are playing, and it is still a prelim final, but I think it's going to be a high-scoring game. I think the forward lines for each side is going to be the difference. Brisbane coming off a shootout last week against GWS, where they scored 105 points but still conceded 100. Geelong's going to score 90 points in this game, and I think Brisbane can. I think Geelong's going to score at least 90 points, and I think Brisbane can at least score the 80, 85 as well to push this total over that number of 173.5. So that's how I'm looking at playing both games. Like Sydney to win by that 20 plus margin. And in the Geelong Brisbane Lions game, leaning towards the try bet either side 1 to 24 and the total to go over 173.5. From a props perspective, we'll just quickly talk about it now while you guys are on here. So firstly, for the Sydney Port Adelaide game, I'd be very cautious taking the Swans players to generate high numbers of disposals. You could potentially pick, like one player to specifically target, but I wouldn't I don't recommend you guys do any multis where it's like 2, 3, or 4 players from the Swans to generate like 20, 25, 30 plus disposals, because Port Adelaide can see the least number of disposals to opposition players. And that's largely due to the fact they can see the least number of uncontested possessions. And so even though like the Swans are about an average disposal rate side, they're not going to have the opportunity to generate high numbers of disposals. So, you definitely target one player, but just don't have, a few of them all up, as, there's likely going to be 1 or 2 players who go under. And, you don't want to have some same game multi or something going and lose it by 1 selection or just 1 or 2 players who don't perform. Don't have too much of an issue taking the disposal markets for Port Adelaide players. Swans do concede about an average number of disposals to the opposition. And I think, yeah, if Port Adelaide get on, have a hot start, which they may have that bit of confidence, the way they ended the game and all the drama, controversy, etc., against Hawthorn, then, they might start the game, get off to a strong start. And that's really going to be the key there for Port Adelaide. The Swans are one of the worst first quarter sides, but from that point forward, they're the best side in the league in quarters 2, 3, and 4. Whereas Port Adelaide, quarter 1 is their best quarter. So there's every chance Port Adelaide get off to a hot start here, and then the Swans come back and run over the top of them, especially considering they have they're the rest of the side coming in and at home. And so, if Port Adelaide are 2 goals in front at quarter time, probably isn't going to be enough. I think the Swans will still overrun them, but that'd be another way of playing this game, is live betting, waiting to see how that first quarter goes. Personally, I think I'm going to just bet early and take the early odds and just Swans to win by 20 plus. I think there's going to be a focus on how they start games. Like, they're making it kind of difficult for themselves by starting slow and then having to run teams down. I think for this game, there's going to be that real focus on how they start their first quarter. I'm sure, like, the fact we're talking about it, the team is going to be aware of it and the coaching staff's going to be aware of it, especially against Port Adelaide, who are a good first quarter side. Swans will kind of aim to implement a similar game plan to what Geelong did against Port Adelaide a couple of weeks ago, get on top early and look to run away with it. Hawthorn last week, struggled in that first quarter against them, and then we're just constantly playing catch up the whole game, which is very difficult to do in these type of games. And then for the Geelong Brisbane Lions game, for disposals, betting, the angles you kind of want to take is you definitely want to be targeting the Brisbane Lions players for their disposals numbers. Geelong concede the 14th most disposals to the opposition, and Brisbane ranks 6th in the league in disposals. They generate both contested and uncontested possessions at a higher rate. And then also fits well because Brisbane they're the number 1 side in kicks per game, ranked 16th in handballs, and Geelong concede more kicks than they do handballs at a higher rate compared to the league average. So everything stacks up well for Lions players to to generate an above average number of disposals in this game. Looking through, we've spoken previously about Brisbane Lions and their first quarters. They're the best first quarter side in the league. I don't think they're going to be able to generate like a quick start against Geelong, who are pretty much the second to third best first quarter side. But the second quarter is going to be very, very interesting. Brisbane really need to capitalize on that area, as that's Geelong's worst quarter of the 4 of them, but it's their second best. For Brisbane to win this game, they're going to have a lead at halftime. They're not going to be able to come from such a deficit, a 40-plus deficit, like they did last week against GWS, and do that same thing against Geelong. So that first half is going to be key for the Brisbane Lions, but I think they can hang in there and keep that margin close, and it's going to be a high-scoring game. So that's how I'm looking at playing both of the games. If you want to use the bet finders, use them for the player disposals. I'll put the link in the description where you can access it. That's also where the bet finders are, is where you can get all my sports bets every single week, not only on the AFL, but also the NRL, which we're in the finals of right now. The NFLs, we're 2 weeks into the NFL season. Major League Baseball coming up right towards the end of the season, then going into playoffs, and then we have NBA and NHL starting in a month or so. So plenty of sports to continue betting on and continue making money on. So I really appreciate you guys watching. Also, in early March next year, I'm going to be releasing the AFL betting guide completely free. If you go to the link in the description, there'll be a link there where you can join the waiting list for that. As soon as the AFL betting guide for the 2025 season, I have it ready to send out, you guys will be first to know if you're on the wait list. So you'll receive an email when it's sent out. So if you want to jump on the wait list, the link is in the description to access that. It's going to be a full-on breakdown of every single team, their strengths, weaknesses, how I think they're going to go in the upcoming season, and how you can make money betting on that side and approach betting on their games to be profitable. Make sure you're subscribed and on the wait list for that. Really appreciate you guys watching right throughout the season. The next preview that I'm going to be doing is going to be for the grand final. I think it's going to be a Sydney versus Geelong grand final, but wouldn't be surprised if it's Sydney versus Brisbane. But I think kind of like the AFL is probably going to want a Melbourne side in there. Geelong, the only Melbourne team left in the competition. We've got Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. So, covering everywhere except the WA sides in the final four teams. So kind of every state still has a team in it. Even though I live in Queensland, I do support Hawthorn. So I kind of go against like the logic of, supporting the side of, where you're from. But the way that it's always been since I was about 6 years old. But yeah, that's the game plan for this week. Good luck with your bets. Hope you guys have a winning weekend. And I'll be back next week to preview the AFL Grand Final. So I'll talk to you guys soon.